and that's a big move for it. Just made a pre-market low at 5.95, now recovering a bit. You did have a low under the $6 level at 5.87, and then two other lows at 5.94 and 5.95. Let's see if the bulls try and protect that level. Harlan, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. Got to give a hat tip to Dennis selling his steel peanuts while the circus is in town.
Your ears must have been ringing there yesterday, Harlan, because we were mentioning you, and I was like, man, if the circus isn't in town right now on U.S. Steel, I don't know when it's gonna be in town. So I'm like, honestly, I've had this. This has ran basically doubled in 2 months. And I'm like, man, I got to take some chips off the table on this thing. And I took all the chips off the table in U.S. Steel.
So you're going to go buy a car now?
Yeah, you say you're supposed to reward yourself afterwards when you get those trades. But no, probably not. No, probably not. I'm cheap,
well,
cheap.
you can't say you're not late to the party if you're buying here. I mean, why would you want to buy it here? It gaps up. And, we see this all the time, where these stocks will gap up and then the dust settles, and so do they. So...
I think
I guess I'm looking at things like that. When I see charts like that, I do hit the sell button. You got to pay yourself because, it also makes up for those trades that you screw up on.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's just, I just look at it. The stock was $25, $26 in July. We're 2 months later and we're trading at $47. I mean, that's almost a double in 2 months. That seems like too much too fast to me. And especially yesterday felt like 6-7 points overnight. It almost seemed just too much.
Bizarro. So, look at the growth rates on these things. What are the growth rates on these things anyway? They're not they're trading like growth stocks. So, I just look at them and I'm going, I don't get it. When I don't get it like that, I tend to stay away. But you know what? When you look at U.S. Steel yesterday and you're looking at gift right there in just 2 days. So, take the money and run. I mean, we are pushing resistance zones on all the indexes.
I mean, what are the? I mean, what is the? Is there just much more demand? I mean, what are they? What's the deal with all the steel? I mean, what are they using it for? What is what's the driver? There has to be something.
I don't know.
It's all these wind turbines in Canada. There's all these wind turbines showing up everywhere in Canada, full of steel. Maybe that's what it is. Canadian driver.
Well. Dennis, it could also be what you alluded to a couple of weeks ago, rotation. It's just, hey, here's a group that, let's rotate into this and run the pants off of this sector. So, that could be in play as well.
Okay. All
right.
And
they did run them, hey?
They've run this whole sector, and obviously 3 stocks all up or all raising their guidance too helps to push them, and that's really giving them a push. What's on your radar here though for today? Like we come up, and what did you think of the Fed there yesterday, Harlan? Because we had that little head fake right after where we sold off a quick 6-7 points, and then we just started buying them and buying them and buying them, and they bought them all the way up to shouting distance of the all-time high here again. What are your thoughts here on the S&P futures after the Fed?
Pretty much, now that the knee jerk that you always get after the announcement. Personally, I think the whole move, the bulk of the move, really took place the day before. Because remember, we got that in growth land, we got that big slam on the NASDAQ, and it took everything out, and they shot it that day. Well, the next day, Janet kind of spills the beans a little bit and says 0 interest rates, for the foreseeable future. That, and then now that China is joining the QE bandwagon. So, I think that was the big bulk of the move was the day before the Tuesday that was. So, how much of that was built in, and then you got the actual the announcement, which really took things and said, all right, well, yeah, it is true. So, let's just run it. Let's take a look at resistance. Which is exactly what we did, and you'll notice the S&P came right up. I mean, like you said, spitting distance from into a new high, and right away, did you notice what happened when it tagged those zones? It came up. It looked at 2010 for a minute or so, and then right back down. So, one could say you're sitting at resistance, and if you're not, go look at the tops of. What month is that? I think August, September on the S&P, line up your tops.
Yeah,
Line up your
Harlan.
tops in August. How much more have you got if you want to, draw a trend line and line up those tops? Okay, so maybe you eke into a new high by a few points. We've seen that before. We've seen that in early August where you eke into a new high and it gets pulled back. We saw it in June and July, too, where it ekes into a new high a little bit and gets pulled back. So I'm just going to call this a resistance zone. And, whether it sticks or not, we'll find out. But, I'm just not seeing a ton of nice setups. So that also tells me something.
The SPOOs, actually, now we rolled the contract from the September to the D's, and we did that last week. Kind of had some unusual trading of the, selling the SEP and buying the D's. But the D's contract made a new high by one tick yesterday, Harlan. I don't know if you were keeping an eye on the futures, but 2003 was the old high. We went through it by one tick, and then you had a precipitous 10-point sell-off. We've hit that level again in pre-market trading up to 2,275. So what would convince you that we're breaking out of this resistance zone? What if we got above there and posted 1, 2, 3 closes? How do you classify a breakout here?
Good question. Sometimes it pays to know where you came from first. And if you take a look at where we've came from, we came from, let's just call it, 1980, and 2 days we just shot right up to resistance again. But yet the relative strength really, on a daily chart isn't really confirming that retest of the highs. So personally, I don't see it sticking. I'm a pullback off highs guy. I need to see a pattern like we saw 2 days ago. From the beginning of September through 2 days ago, that was a nice orderly pullback off highs pattern right down to the, call it the 50-day moving average. So there was a nice trade setup there, albeit while it was in that pullback, it was really wide-ranging days. So, that's what I need to see to convince me that we're going higher. Show me some sort of pullback. I just don't like, buying resistance, when you just came off the gutter really fast and furious. So,
Harlan, I want to ask you about
show me a pullback.
Okay. I want to ask you about Netflix here. We had Pete A asking about it. It had the decline. And what do you think about a stock that, has the 2 bad down days and then recovers, and then when the market really gets the giddy up and it doesn't go, does that worry you a little bit? Because you think with the kind of rally that we had, and also the rally that we would have had today, you think that thing would have recovered a little bit more ground than it did. Does that ever give you a little bit of a clue on a stock when, it just won't get the giddy up with the market?
Actually, I'm glad you bring this up because it's something that I've noticed just recently. Remember it used to be earlier in the year, it was Netflix, CMG, and Priceline. Those were the big glamour stocks that they would just run the pants off of. Now, all three of those darlings are just not working. So I'm going to call it last up runs. Leaders seem to be as if they're turning into the laggards. I mean, it's almost as if people are worn out on them. We're just kind of bored with Netflix, CMG, and Priceline. So who's going to be the new guard? Who's going to be the new crazy stocks that take their place? That's the question. So I just don't see it. It's akin to last cycle's leaders, next cycle's laggards. Well, in a smaller sense, that's the way I see Netflix, CMG, and Priceline. They're just not where I want to be. They're just not acting right. But then again, look where they've came from. In May, Netflix, you're looking at it at 320 and, bouncing its head on 480, 490, and it just couldn't go. But you notice how a couple of times in September it tried to eke into a new high and immediately got turned back. So I think they're old guard.
Okay, that's a good explanation.
I'd rather be looking for new leadership. Something that can pick up the torch from these three stocks.
And I'll tell you where it is.
Where is it?
Financials.
Yeah, good question.
Well,
So I don't
financials, you're
know.
right, Joel. The financials have been moving up. What do you think of these, though? I had Morgan Stanley here, Harlan, breaking out to new highs yesterday. Goldman Sachs breaking out to new highs. Citigroup tried to make a new high, then closed off of it. JP Morgan broke out, made a new high on the move. Bank of America tried to make a new high on the move, but all these financials have been very strong in the last week or two. What's your thoughts here on this sector?
Well, a couple of things. I think don't financials make up 13% of the S&P? They make up a big piece of the S&P 500. So that's one thing. If you want to keep the drive alive, you're going to grab a big percentage sector, and move it. So that's one thing that comes into play. And then what was it? A couple of days ago, we saw all the REITs just take it on the chin, because interest rates were going up. Well, guess what? Don't rising interest rates help the banks?
That's a question I've asked a lot of our guests in the last few days, and I never really got a definitive answer. What's your answer on that?
Say that again?
I said I've asked that, to a couple of our guests over the last few days about do rising interest rates help banks, and I never really got a definitive answer, one way or the other. What's your take?
It should hurt them, but it doesn't seem to.
Nothing hurts the banks.
Well,
right
see,
now.
that's just it. Nobody's got the right answer, and I don't honestly know either. I'm just trying to look for reasons why it could. We've often heard that, and I have nothing to back it up. So I'll be honest with you. I was just repeating what I've heard, over the years. That, it helps the banks, it helps the banks. How many times have we heard that? So, but, no one's really ever looked into it. I know I haven't, because I'm more of a growth guy. So, the financials, I just kind of, I hate banks.
We got a couple
too big to fail.
Okay, let's move you out of the financial sector here. Rob Hood, who's one of your biggest fans there in the chat, is giving you two stocks. He's trying to find Harlan charts here. First one's PCYC. It's kind of got the Harlan look to it, where it's pulled up and it's consolidated here for a long period of time, and it's kind of looking right in the middle here like it could be a little bit itchy. What are your thoughts on PCYC?
Well, these bios are crazy stocks, bios and medicals. 115 to 130 is your range, albeit, it doesn't like to go above 125 for all that long. So right now, I'm just going to call this stock range bound between 115 is support, which is also the 50-day, and 125, 127 is resistance. So, right now it's a no man's land, just chewing around. If you're a buy support, sell resistance guy, the last 2 months, month and a half, hasn't been bad. If you buy that 115 in the face of fear and sell that 125 plus in strength.
Here's an
Not much
interesting
really to say about it.
Harlan, here's another interesting one from Rob Hood, too. ECYT, a stock that absolutely looks like it got murdered there. Is that right back in May, or was that a split or something? The stock went from 18 down to $6, and then it's come back
I don't know.
6 to 9, and now it's pulled back, and it's trying to consolidate around 8. What do you think of this chart here on
Actually,
ECYT?
I've been watching this stock. I have been watching this stock. Just draw a line across 7.5. And then, you get these spikes up. Here we go. You get those big spikes up. Then they start sucking people in. I let the dust settle when you see names like this. It's nice that you saw that big spike up, gapped up, took off, and ran. And what do you notice now? The dust is settled, and it's pulling back off highs, and it's digesting and consolidating those two big spike ups. So I got nothing bad to say. Support's at 7.5 zone. It's pulling back off its highs. And, if it breaks over that pullback off highs, you could probably take the trade and enjoy the ride with a stop at, if it breaks below 7.5, get out of it. But here's the key. It's still building. And here we have markets that, are sitting in resistance zones. So even if it breaks right here, I'd be a little bit leery, because 3 out of 4 stocks will trade with the overall market. And, if we come back down in the market for a few days, this thing could still build out. So I keep it on the watch list, which is what I'm doing. I'd like to see a little bit more time, but I like the pattern that I'm seeing building.
Okay, just real quickly, on May 2nd, Indocyte initiated a trial, but they also, Merck and Indocyte reported DSMB has been recommended trial of vintolifilide trial to be suspended, cites trial not showing efficacy.
Ooh.
So, that's the reason for the whack. I think keep your eye on your biotech calendar here for your next update on Endocyte. Harlan, before we let you go, we're going to need your comments on Amazon.
AMZN. Well, I love the fire commercial with the little kid, but it's all over the place. It really is. I look at a chart from May, and it's just wide, loose, sloppy, and you just, you got to squint to see a pattern. And even when I squint, I really can't see any pattern except support's around 310. Sloppy.
I see support. I see
sloppy.
some. I have to beg to differ with this on Harlan. It filled the gap at the 320 area that it had back from earlier in the month. To me, this chart looks good as long as it holds 320. Maybe come back and trade to the top of that range, 332, 335 area. But ahead of that 310 area, I like 320. All right, Harlan.
I get that. No, I totally get that. I mean, I can, you filled the gap, and yeah, it's pulling back off its highs. So from an even shorter time zone that you're dealing in, yeah, I see that. I totally see that. So, but if it breaks 320, it's probably going to 310.
That Harlan Pyan guy's all about trends, though, and he doesn't see the trend, and I don't see a trend there either. I do see support, though. I agree with your support.
Well, I see exactly what he's saying. I see exactly what Joel is saying. Now it's just a matter of, is 320 going to hold? And if 320 can hold, just line up your tops off of that 350. And, if it breaks over, there's your trade with a step over at 320. If it breaks 320, you just got to get out.
Okay, Harlan Pyan, all about trends, talking about trends. We will be with you again on next Thursday. Have a good quad witch and a good weekend.
You bet. Take care, guys. See you later.
See ya, Harlan.